Mr. RC, Mr. Ma, good to see both of you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure over the years you are here, Mr. RC, the green goals are being efficiently
implemented. Yes, I can say that.
How does that work? Why, when we see great examples like this, while others are still expressing their thoughts as whether the system still works or not?
You see, there are three things which are very vital for change. Number one is political will. Without political will, that change does not happen. So the dramatic transformation that China has had, I mean, we are sitting here in Beijing, where the air quality is near perfect. Not long ago, the air quality in Beijing used to be one of the worst in the world. But look at the transformation. Without political will, it would not have been possible. The second is the right public policies. You need the public policies for the green transition to take place. That is why you have companies like Envision, and you have companies like Longji, and you have these different sorts of private sector company and SOE that have invested to making sure that they could go to the green transition and make it effective. That's why your electric vehicles have now become the best in class all over the world. 10 years ago, you couldn't have even comprehended that you would have automation in electric
China
vehicles,
and
China as a leader. And the third is partnerships. How, right down to the counties, different forms of partnerships with the government, with the private sector, with SOEs, all coming together, universities coming together, and this transformation happening. The rural revitalization which is taking place, which is injected towards the green. And therefore, regardless of countries walking in or walking out of the Paris Agreement, we need a model. And China can actually galvanize the global south in that area. And not just that, this is not out of being charity, but it can also make a lot of money for countless countries and generate a new generation of jobs.
Why do we have examples like this? Well, others are still trying to withdraw from a great grand scheme, which has already been implemented. Why the world has to throw away all its important efforts just like that? How are these great examples, not just in China, but also in other global south countries? How will these examples be able to revitalize people's understanding about the future, what we can do together?
Today, if I look at Kenya, for example, with President Ruto there, who's really driving the engine of a green growth in Kenya and in Africa. So he says, regardless of the other countries, he hosted a forum on a climate forum where he got what is known as the Africa Consensus to bring African leaders together on this. So actually, there are many countries which are following through. If you go to Rwanda today, I mean, a country which not too long ago had a genocide, today, if you go to Kigali, it looks like a European city. So it really depends on political will, but there are countries which are stepping up. And what the UN is doing, what the Secretary General is trying to do is encourage it. So what can the UN do? It can connect, it can convene, it can catalyze relationships and bring like-minded countries together to move forward. And with countries with differences, at least they can sit on the table and have a dialogue.
Yeah. Mr. Ma, how is China digesting the fact that some has been trying to walk away from what has already been achieved, which is not easy to come by for many players? How are you digesting this? For example, on the green development, it's not just China, but also many other examples around the world. It can bring wealth. It can bring better environment. It can bring tomorrow and the future, better potential. But why? How do you see some countries are walking away from this and say others, you do not need to participate that. Don't do it.
Some of the countries, they are making statements on power. It's based on power politics. Still, what we say, the Chinese scholars will say, the Cold War thinking.
Cold War mentality.
Yes. At that time, the United States and the Soviet Union, there are two different groups of countries. And now, many countries they developed very quickly, especially China. So some of the countries, they will see this is a threat. Actually, it's a very important actor to keep world peace. But not many countries understand that.
Is it out of jealousy? Is it out of arrogance? Is it out of what? How are you digesting this?
I think it's some of the interests. This is the most important. Not arrogance, not jealousy, but it's
Fundamental interest.
Yeah. Interest. Some of the countries, one country or some of the countries, they want to dominate the international affairs. They even don't go through the United Nations. They overpass. If the United Nations may make some of the decisions, they think it's okay. It's meet my needs. I agree. If you don't, I just go away and do what I want to do. So I covered the war in last century, in Iraq war, Kuwait war, the Cambodian war. I covered all these wars. You know, what's the reason? Some of the war, there is no reason at all. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how to explain that. Right. It's a very difficult question.
Yeah. Right. I see, here is where we need wisdom. And this is where China can play an important role as a 5,000-year-old civilization to be able to rise above the fray. Yeah. This needs a more of a Taoist kind of, approach to things. I believe we need to rekindle that faith. That is why, when initiatives such as the Global Development Initiative or even the Global Civilization Initiatives allows an interplay of dialogue of civilizational consequences are very relevant, because if you look at Asia today, it is inevitable. We are seeing the rise of Asia. If you look at the ASEAN market, 650 million people, it is a progressive market. You look at China, you look at the entire ecosystem of India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, all these countries which are emerging, young populations on one side, aging population on the other. The interplay of economics is very consequential here. But this connection which is happening with Africa is opening up an entire new arena. It's a new horizon, because I'm saying, Africa is going to have 2.5 billion people by 2050. It is going to be the future of consumption and production as populations are aging.
It's not just Africa, but also Latin America,
Absolutely.
The Global South countries.
The Global South countries.
So here comes the question, what the Global South countries can do together. And also, how will the Global South countries cooperate with the others around the world?
The United Nations still
here
remains the most...
Time.
No, that is why the Secretary General is convening these countries. But that is why the spirit of the Bandung Conference needs to be resurrected. So as we come to this April, we have to find a way. How do we recalibrate this environment? How do we make sure that this entity that was created in 1945, which for the United Nations, the Secretary General is trying to preserve?
There are already some grand plans supported by countries, not only in just Global South, but also the Global North, so to speak. For example, Belt and Road Initiative. And Mr. Ma, how do you see that can be further updated and meet the needs of the level of discussion, the level of wisdom that we need to explore today?
I think the very important thing is the development. If you develop your economies to a certain level, you have the right to speak, or your voice will be heard by other countries. If your economy is decreasing or it's not developed very good, that will be a problem. True. So that is why the Global South countries should cooperate closely and for development. Sure. And on the other hand, for their security, because they come together, have a group. The group is not for we said it's not a block of politics, but a block of development. Then when we develop our economy to a certain level, then the South, Global South will be, their voice will be heard, both in the United Nations and throughout the world.
But there are current roadblocks.
Look,
For
roadblocks.
example, tariffs we have seen over the past few days, and the world is so nervous. Not only the business people, everybody, the market as well.
How to reach the consensus, that is the problem. Now, all the countries in the United Nations or in the other groups, like the Global South, they have different opinions. The different countries have different opinions, and even in some other regions, like in the Middle East, in Asia, different opinion, different groups, different countries that have different ideas. So
how to bring a fragmented world together, that is the key.
that is, I think, the United Nations, they have a role to play. Because the United Nations is a very important international organization. I think it's the most important.
Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.